In the summer of 1944, the road to victory was paved with dust, diesel, and determination. As the Allied armies surged across France after breaking through Normandy, one unstoppable force threatened to grind to a halt, not the Germans, but the empty fuel tanks of General Patton's Third Army. The war machine that thundered across Europe was starving for fuel, food, and ammunition, and without a steady flow of supplies, the liberation of France would die in its tracks. From this crisis was born the most daring supply operation of World War II, the Red Ball Express. Operating around the clock, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This legendary convoy became the lifeline of freedom, an unbroken chain of trucks racing against time across war-torn roads under constant threat from German bombers and snipers. The drivers were mostly young African-American soldiers, many just out of high school, serving in a segregated army that barely recognized their worth. Yet it was their courage, endurance, and sheer willpower that kept Patton's tanks rolling. Over 6,000 trucks roared through the French countryside, their engines howling like steel beasts, each carrying precious cargo fuel, food, ammunition, and hope. The Red Ball route stretched from the beaches of Normandy to the front lines, a 700-mile round trip through chaos and destruction, marked by dust clouds and the relentless hum of engines that never stopped. Sleep was a luxury, death a constant passenger. Drivers pushed through rain, mud, bomb craters, and enemy ambushes, often navigating blackout roads with only the dim glow of convoy lights and instinct to guide them. They drove with the pedal down and faith in their hearts, knowing that if the convoys failed, entire divisions would stall and die. Every mile was a gamble, every delivery a small miracle. To the soldiers on the front, the sound of those approaching engines meant one thing: salvation. The Red Ball Express wasn't just a supply line. It was a living artery pumping life into an army that refused to stop. As the war dragged on, it became a symbol of what men could achieve when the world demanded the impossible. These weren't heroes from history books or generals with medals. They were ordinary men doing an extraordinary job, and their story would come to define the spirit of endurance that carried the Allies to victory. The Red Ball Express rolled out like thunder across a wounded France, its endless stream of trucks snaking through the rubble and wreckage left behind by retreating German forces. The men behind the wheels, most of them black soldiers from segregated units, were told the mission was simple: keep Patton's army moving, no matter the cost. But what seemed like a logistical operation soon became a test of human endurance, courage, and unity under fire. The roads were treacherous, littered with debris, collapsed bridges, and unexploded shells. Rain turned the dirt into thick mud, engines overheated, and tires shredded on shrapnel. Yet, not a single driver hesitated. They learned to change a tire while being strafed by Luftwaffe fighters, to drive through the night without headlights, to eat, sleep, and breathe diesel fumes while the world burned around them. Many had never left their hometowns before the war, yet now they found themselves racing through battlefields where every shadow could be death. Orders were clear: keep it moving. If a truck broke down, it was pushed off the road and abandoned. Another would take its place. Time was the enemy, and hesitation could cost lives. The drivers became ghosts of the highway, their faces streaked with oil and dust, their eyes hollow from sleepless nights. The convoys had no glamour, no medals, no glory, but without them, the mighty Third Army would have fallen silent. The men began to form an unspoken brotherhood, bonded by exhaustion, danger, and shared purpose. They called it the Red Ball Run, named after the red circle painted on their trucks, and the road signs marking their path a symbol of speed and sacrifice. German fighter planes hunted them from the skies, and sabotage teams ambushed them from the woods, yet the convoy never stopped. They learned to fire back, to fight as they drove, to patch bullet holes with canvas and prayer. Along the route, French civilians stood in awe, watching this endless line of American trucks roaring toward the front, carrying the fuel of liberation. Some threw flowers, others tears. They knew these men were the heartbeat of the Allied advance, and though history often forgets their names, on those roads they were giants warriors in steel, carrying the weight of a continent's freedom on their shoulders. As August bled into September 1944, the Red Ball Express had become a roaring artery of war, pumping more than 12,000 tons of supplies a day through France. The men worked in 12-hour shifts that often stretched into 20, driving to Anderhaft on GMC Dusonderhofs that groaned under impossible loads. Sleep came in stolen fragments, meals were eaten on the move, and the line between man and machine blurred. Dust choked their lungs, sweat stung their eyes, and fear became routine. The Germans knew these convoys were vital and struck whenever they could, mines buried beneath roads, snipers hidden in church towers, and strafing runs from the sky. Every journey was a gamble, yet the drivers pushed on, driven by duty and something deeper, quiet defiance against the racism that branded them second-class soldiers. The army called them colored truckers, but on those roads, they were indispensable. Many officers doubted their discipline, yet time and again it was these men who delivered when others failed. They were mechanics, improvisers, fighters. When fuel ran out, they siphoned from wrecks. When bridges fell, they built makeshift crossings from shattered planks and hope. They learned to navigate by memory, to read the sky, to feel the road as if it spoke to them. Accidents were constant, exhaustion brutal. Trucks overturned in ditches, engines caught fire, and men disappeared into the night without a trace. Still, replacements arrived, climbing into the driver's seat without question, knowing full well what awaited them ahead. The Red Ball Express was more than logistics, it was a living organism of sacrifice and resolve. To keep Patton's tanks fueled meant the difference between victory and defeat. He famously said, "My men can eat their belts, but my tanks gotta have gas." Those words echoed in every driver's mind as they hurtled through darkness, tires humming like a hymn of persistence. Sometimes they laughed to stay sane. Other times they drove in silence, haunted by what they'd seen on the road. Each delivery completed was a battle won. Each mile conquered an act of resistance. The convoy's rhythm became the heartbeat of liberation, itself relentless, unyielding, unstoppable. And as they rolled through the broken heart of France, they carried more than supplies. They carried the burden and pride of a generation that refused to quit. By late September, the Red Ball Express had become both legend and torment. The drivers were ghosts behind the wheels, eyes hollow from sleepless nights, uniforms soaked in oil and rain, spirits held together by the rhythm of engines that never stopped. The roads of France were no longer roads, they were scars carved into mud and fire. Convoys stretched for miles, headlights blacked out to avoid detection. Their paths marked only by the faint glow of cigarette tips and the low rumble of hundreds of engines moving in unison like a single wounded beast. Danger hid everywhere. Bridges bombed hours earlier might still be burning when the first trucks reached them. German artillery targeted the routes relentlessly, and still the drivers pressed forward, weaving through flames and wreckage, knowing every minute lost meant another unit starved of fuel, another tank silent on the front line. Orders were simple: keep moving no matter what. Trucks that broke down were stripped for parts, their carcasses left on the roadside as grim monuments to the price of speed. The men had begun to talk about the roads as if they were alive, whispering of curves that killed and towns that vanished overnight under shell fire. Many of the soldiers were barely 20, pulled from farms and factories, now commanding tons of steel through a country torn apart by war. Yet in that crucible of exhaustion and chaos, a strange pride emerged. They were not in the newspapers, not in the official speeches, but they knew that without them, Patton's armored divisions would have ground to a halt. It was said that the Third Army moved as fast as the red ball could feed it, and that truth gave them strength. Sometimes they'd catch sight of liberated French villages, children waving, women offering bread, and for a brief moment they'd remember why they drove. Then the moment would pass, the engines would roar again, and the line would move. The Red Ball Express was more than a mission. It was a race against time, against despair, against the very limits of human endurance. And as autumn deepened and the war dragged on, the convoys became symbols of silent heroism, of men who carried victory not on their shoulders, but in the endless turning of their wheels. By mid-October, the Red Ball Express had reached a pace and efficiency that astonished even the most seasoned officers. Trucks rolled day and night without pause, headlights dimmed, engines straining. As young drivers with blistered hands and sore feet became the lifeline of Patton's Third Army, the roads were a gauntlet of destruction craters from artillery, burned-out vehicles, and the omnipresent mud that sucked tires and morale alike. But the drivers pressed on, their eyes trained on the horizon, hearts set on the knowledge that each mile meant fuel in a tank, ammunition in a gun, food for the soldiers at the front. Some nights, under a blacked-out sky, they drove past bombed-out villages, the ruins illuminated only by flickers of fire and the occasional tracer from enemy snipers, knowing that any pause could cost lives. Accidents were common: jackknifed trailers, trucks sliding into ditches, collisions on narrow bridges. Yet the men learned to improvise, pulling each other out of mud, jury-rigging broken axles, siphoning gas from one vehicle to keep another moving. The camaraderie forged under fire deeper than any bond on safe ground. Letters from home were rare, news of the war fragmented. Yet the drivers kept their spirits with jokes shouted over the roar of engines. Songs hummed to keep fatigue at bay, and a stubborn pride in being the invisible army behind the army. The ones who made victory possible even when it was not celebrated. Occasionally they encountered liberated towns, the faces of civilians, smiling, crying, waving, reminding them of the stakes, giving brief warmth to hands numb from steering and clutching wheel. The Red Ball Express became a living organism, trucks moving in a continuous line, almost like blood pumping through veins, sustaining the fighting heart of Patton's army. Senior officers marveled at the operation, noting that what seemed impossible on paper had become routine in practice. Yet routine did not mean safe. Mines, snipers, air attacks, treacherous terrain, and mechanical failures were constants. Drivers learned to navigate by instinct, to anticipate danger, to trust the convoy as a single entity. Fatigue pressed on them relentlessly, sleep stolen in brief, exhausted bursts in fields beside idling trucks. They were young, often barely trained, yet necessity honed them into masters of survival and speed. Their accomplishments were measured not in medals or parades, but in miles delivered. Tons of supplies moved, and lives sustained at the front. By the time the Allies reached the borders of Germany, the Red Bull Express had become a legend, a testament to endurance, ingenuity, and courage the quiet, unsung engine of one of the fastest and most decisive advances in modern warfare. The pace of the Red Bull Express intensified as Patton's armored divisions pushed deeper into enemy territory, and every truck driver felt the weight of responsibility pressing down harder than ever before. Convoys stretched for miles along pockmarked roads, engines roaring in unison, tires grinding over shell craters and debris, while young soldiers at the wheel balanced between exhaustion and adrenaline, knowing that a single mistake could halt the lifeline for the men ahead. There was no glamour in their work, no fanfare, only the relentless hum of diesel engines, the smell of oil and gasoline, and the constant vigilance required to survive both the road and the enemy. Sleep was a luxury stolen in 15-minute increments beside idling trucks. Meals were often cold, hastily eaten in the cab while navigating sharp turns and steep inclines. Yet the drivers pressed on, driven by a sense of duty that transcended fear. Communication was minimal. Signals passed hand to hand, flags waved briefly, and headlights flashed in code to avoid drawing attention from enemy aircraft or artillery. The drivers became experts at improvisation, patching tires with leather belts, jury-rigging, steering components, siphoning gas from abandoned vehicles, and coaxing engines to life with a patience born from necessity. Each mile carried a risk of ambush, mines, or mechanical failure, and every successful delivery was a quiet triumph, celebrated in brief smiles, handshakes, and the shared understanding that what they did mattered more than accolades. The Red Bull Express was more than a supply line. It was the beating heart of Patton's advance, moving food, ammunition, fuel, and medical supplies faster than any enemy could disrupt. Even as the terrain grew more treacherous, roads narrowed through destroyed villages, bridges weakened from constant bombardment, and weather turned mud into a viscous trap, the drivers adapted, developing a rhythm and coordination that transformed chaos into a controlled, efficient system. Letters from home arrived sporadically, morale fluctuated, but the bond between drivers strengthened, built on shared danger, mutual reliance, and a stubborn determination to keep moving. The operation drew attention from high command, and while some officers questioned the wisdom of pushing so hard, those at the front knew the truth. The Red Bull Express was indispensable. Soldiers in the tanks and on foot came to understand that each gallon of fuel, each round of ammunition, each loaf of bread delivered by these young drivers was the difference between success and catastrophe. By the time the advance reached the Rhine, the legend of the Red Bull Express was cemented, a story of courage, ingenuity, and sheer human endurance, where ordinary men performed extraordinary feats, moving the machinery of war through devastation and danger, sustaining the fighting force that would eventually drive into the heart of Germany and bring the war closer to its end. Exhaustion and adrenaline blurred together as the Red Bull Express pressed on. The endless lines of trucks snaking through the devastated countryside like metallic serpents, engines straining under overloaded cargo, suspensions groaning over shell-cratered roads, and drivers gripping the steering wheel with raw determination, aware that any lapse in concentration could be fatal. Dust and smoke hung in the air, mixing with the acrid stench of burning vehicles. And yet the men moved forward, navigating treacherous terrain where bridges were destroyed, roads were blocked, and minds lay hidden like silent predators waiting for the slightest misstep. Sleep was nearly non-existent, snatched in brief moments while parked in ditches or behind ruined buildings. Meals were cold and hurried, often nothing more than a bite of bread or a swig of water. And injuries were treated quickly and returned to the wheel with grim resolve, because there was no one else to take their place and the convoys could not stop. Discipline was rigid yet adaptive. Drivers communicated through hand signals, flashes of headlights, or the simplest shouts, keeping the flow of supplies continuous, knowing that tanks, artillery, and infantry depended on every gallon of fuel, every shell, and every ration to maintain momentum. Mechanical failures were constant companions, and yet the ingenuity of the men shone through as they patched tires with scrap metal, siphoned fuel from abandoned vehicles, and rigged engines to keep moving despite worn-out parts and overworked machinery. The convoy became a self-contained ecosystem, a network of men who understood each other's limitations and strengths, sharing not only the labor but the burden of responsibility, developing an unspoken camaraderie forged in the crucible of relentless work and constant danger. High above, reconnaissance planes occasionally circled, relaying the success of the operation to Patton, yet at the front it was the driver's skill, courage, and persistence that mattered most. Every mile gained was a victory over both the elements and the enemy, and each successful delivery reinforced the understanding that they were not merely transporting supplies but sustaining an entire army's advance. Even in moments of despair, when weather turned mud into a viscous enemy or roads collapsed under the weight of the vehicles, the men pressed on, improvising solutions, urging each other forward, and drawing strength from small victories. A cleared road, a repaired engine, a message delivered. Their efforts ensured that Patton's Third Army could maintain the relentless pace of its campaign, striking fear into the retreating German forces and demonstrating that logistical excellence could be as decisive as battlefield valor. The Red Ball Express became emblematic of determination, coordination, and unyielding courage, proving that ordinary men, operating under extraordinary pressure, could achieve feats that changed the course of the war, mile by exhausting mile, through tireless labor, unwavering focus, and a commitment to each other and their mission that transcended the limits of fatigue and fear. Nightfall brought no relief to the Red Ball Express drivers, for the darkness was just another enemy, concealing the hidden dangers of shell holes, destroyed bridges, and sudden ambushes, while also masking the way forward and forcing the men to rely on headlights that cut only brief cones of light through the blackened countryside, revealing only the next few feet of road, while leaving the surrounding devastation shrouded in shadow. Yet the convoy moved relentlessly, engines growling, horns blaring to warn stragglers and signal turns, and the men inside trucks stiff and aching from hours of driving, hands blistered, eyes bloodshot, yet hearts beating with the knowledge that every delivery was vital to the survival of the spearhead forces pushing toward the German heartland. Communication was minimal but effective, a series of hand signals, brief shouts, and the occasional flare to guide vehicles through intersections, bombed-out towns, or treacherous curves, and each driver had learned to read the subtle cues of those around him, understanding when to accelerate, when to slow, and when to cover a fellow soldier's mistake, because a single misstep could trigger a chain reaction that might crush trucks behind or leave men stranded miles from safety. Morale was tested continually. Fatigue gnawed at minds and bodies alike, and yet humor and camaraderie provided fragile lifelines. As drivers exchanged quips through open windows, shared stolen rations, or recalled stories of home. Small human comforts that countered the constant roar of engines and the ever-present smell of fuel, smoke, and mud. Mechanical failures, inevitable under the strain of constant use, were met with swift improvisation. Men stripping down engines in the rain, patching tires with wire and scraps, siphoning gas from wrecked vehicles, and coaxing reluctant trucks back to life with a mixture of skill, desperation, and sheer stubbornness, knowing that if they failed, the tanks, artillery, and infantry awaiting their supplies could be immobilized or destroyed. The convoy's movement was a delicate choreography, each truck dependent on the one before it. Drivers adjusting for the weight of cargo, the slipperiness of mud, and the hazards of shattered roads, while sergeants and lieutenants monitored progress, rerouting vehicles when bridges were down, guiding the convoy around obstacles and keeping the men alert. Because the enemy could strike at any moment with artillery, ambushes, or aircraft, and the margin for error was non-existent. Even in the darkest hours, small victories sustained them. A repaired engine, a cleared road, a successfully delivered shipment that would allow tanks to break and artillery to fire accurately, or infantry to advance, and with each mile gained, the drivers grew more confident, more synchronized, aware that their unglamorous, exhausting labor was critical to the momentum of Patton's Third Army, and that their courage and endurance, unseen by the world, were reshaping the battlefield itself. The Red Ball Express, through endless nights and days of tireless effort, became more than a supply line. It was a testament to human endurance, ingenuity, and the relentless will to overcome every obstacle, proving that even in war, ordinary men could achieve extraordinary feats through discipline, courage, and unwavering commitment to each other and the mission. Dawn broke over the war-torn landscape, revealing the full scope of the destruction the Red Ball Express had traversed through the night. The roads scarred by craters and twisted metal, villages reduced to rubble, and forests stripped bare by shellfire, yet the drivers pressed onward, fueled by sheer determination and the knowledge that every gallon of gasoline, every crate of ammunition, every ration delivered meant the difference between life and death for the troops fighting on the front lines. Their trucks rumbling steadily despite the mud that clung like glue to tires and chassis, engines whining under the load, each man attuned to the rhythm of the convoy and the subtle signals that allowed hundreds of vehicles to move as a single, cohesive unit, an artery pumping vital resources to the spearhead of Patton's army. The pace was relentless, and the drivers learned to trust not only their instincts but each other, watching for the sudden tilt of a truck bed, the flare of brake lights, or the raised hand of a sergeant signaling a detour around a destroyed bridge or a bombed-out intersection, while constantly scanning for snipers, mines, and the occasional German patrol that still lingered behind the front. Their presence a reminder that no stretch of road was ever truly safe, and that vigilance had to be maintained even when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm both body and mind. Food and water were scarce luxuries, often rationed to make it through the next stretch of the route, and sleep was a fleeting prize, snatched in short bursts in the back of a truck or under a tarpaulin in the rain. Yet the men adapted, developing a rhythm of work and rest, communicating in shorthand and gestures, learning to anticipate the behavior of the vehicles ahead, and taking pride in the skill required to maneuver tons of cargo over roads that had been reduced to mud tracks. Broken pavement, or nothing at all all while maintaining a pace that ensured that Patton's tanks would never be stalled for lack of fuel or shells. Accidents happened frequently. Trucks jackknifed, overturned, or became mired in mud, and each incident demanded immediate action, with mechanics and drivers alike working feverishly to extricate the vehicles, patch engines, and get back on the road, knowing the delay could cost lives. And yet even in these moments of crisis, camaraderie flourished, men helping one another, sharing tools and knowledge, sometimes even carrying supplies from one truck to another by hand to keep the flow unbroken. The Red Ball Express became a machine of human endurance, ingenuity, and relentless courage, where the line between driver and soldier blurred. And the men who manned the convoy understood that their mission, though unseen by the public and often unglorified, was as vital to the war effort as the soldiers advancing on the front, for without their sweat, skill, and tenacity, the spearhead of Patton's Third Army might have stalled, and the momentum of victory could have faltered, making each mile conquered not just a measure of distance, but a testament to the determination, discipline, and unbreakable spirit of the men who drove tirelessly through night and day, mud and fire, under threat of enemy action, yet never faltering, never stopping, and never losing sight of the fact that their labor, their courage, and their endurance were the lifeblood of the push into Germany. By mid-morning, the Red Ball drivers were deep into enemy territory, the landscape alternately scarred by battle and deceptively calm, with abandoned villages and smouldering farmhouses lining the route, while the distant rumble of artillery reminded them that the front was never far away, and every mile brought new challenges, from potholes and shell craters that threatened to tear axles apart, to sudden turns in the road that demanded split-second judgment and precise maneuvering to avoid collisions, all compounded by the weight of hundreds of gallons of fuel and tons of supplies strapped into each truck. The driver's hands raw from constant shifting of gears, the vibrations of engines transmitted through every bone, and the endless dust and mud that coated faces and clothes, making sleep and comfort almost impossible. Yet the men drove on, bound by a sense of duty and the unspoken understanding that the soldiers waiting on the other end depended entirely on their skill, stamina, and determination. Communication was minimal but effective. A flash of hand signals, the tilt of a head, the honk of a horn, or the flicker of headlights at night allowed the convoy to maintain coordination across the long chain of vehicles, while the sergeants and lieutenants monitored progress, issuing orders with calm authority and correcting course as needed, aware that one wrong turn or hesitation could strand a truck in the mud or, worse, into the path of German patrols, mines, or artillery fire. Despite the danger, moments of humor and camaraderie punctuated the long hours, with drivers exchanging stories, teasing one another, or improvising small competitions to keep morale high. Yet there was always the underlying tension, a constant awareness that their cargo was not just supplies but the lifeline of Patton's advancing army, and a delay or loss could cost lives. When breakdowns occurred, the crew worked in perfect unison. Men jumped from trucks. Engines were stripped and repaired in the mud, tires replaced under the sun or rain, sometimes under fire, and every repair was done quickly, efficiently, and without complaint, the mantra of keep moving guiding every action, while the convoy surged forward like a living organism, each truck a vital organ, each driver a heartbeat, and the road itself a vein through which the lifeblood of the army flowed. As they drove, the men became intimately familiar with the terrain, the deceptive slope of a hill that hid a mud pit, the twist of a forest road that could conceal a German ambush, the landmarks that signaled a turn or obstacle ahead. And the rhythm of the convoy grew almost instinctual, drivers anticipating the actions of those ahead and behind, moving with precision and speed that belied the chaos surrounding them, all in service of a mission that, though unsung, was crucial, keeping Patton's army supplied, mobile and unstoppable. Nightfall brought no respite. Headlights pierced the darkness as trucks continued to roll, mud sucking at wheels. The scent of gasoline and smoke mingling with the cold night air, yet the Red Bull Express pressed on, a testament to human endurance, discipline, and courage. Each mile a triumph of willpower, each successful delivery a quiet victory that brought the end of the war that much closer. And each driver, despite exhaustion and danger, knew they were part of something greater than themselves. A chain of effort and sacrifice that fueled the momentum of history itself. By the second day of the operation, the Red Bull Express had developed a rhythm, though it was a fragile one, constantly tested by mechanical failures, unpredictable terrain, and the ever-present threat of enemy action, with trucks moving in long, seemingly endless lines that stretched across roads, fields, and makeshift bridges hastily repaired or constructed by the drivers themselves. The sound of engines, clanking metal, and shouted orders forming a strange, relentless symphony of war, while drivers fought fatigue with sheer determination, trading brief nods and hand signals to maintain coordination, aware that one misstep could create a chain reaction of stalled trucks, accidents, or worse, that their mission was vital. Every gallon of gasoline, every shell, every ration carried could make the difference between success and disaster for Patton's spearheading units, and this knowledge sharpened focus beyond normal human endurance. The trucks themselves became characters in this drama, each with quirks and faults that the men knew intimately, engines that coughed and spluttered before roaring to life, brakes that sometimes failed under the weight of cargo, tires that tore through mud and sharp rocks, and the constant battle against overfilled fuel tanks, threatening to spill under the violent turns and sudden stops required by the twisting roads. Yet every vehicle that made it to the front was a triumph, a symbol of ingenuity and grit, and the drivers took pride in keeping their trucks moving when all odds suggested they should have stalled or broken down. Along the route, the drivers witnessed the scars of war, abandoned villages, shell-pocked fields, and bombed-out bridges, yet also moments of humanity. Civilians cautiously emerging to watch the passing convoy, soldiers waving from the front lines, and small acts of camaraderie among the drivers themselves, sharing food, water, or a joke to keep spirits up despite exhaustion and constant danger, while the officers coordinated with precision, plotting routes, anticipating obstacles, and improvising solutions to keep the supply chain intact. Night driving brought its own perils, headlights illuminating only a narrow swath of road, mud and potholes hidden in the darkness, sudden gunfire or artillery adding to the chaos, yet the convoy continued. Each mile covered a testament to the relentless drive of men who understood the stakes and the importance of their task, their bodies screaming from lack of rest, their minds alert to the slightest change in road conditions or enemy activity. Each stop a calculated risk, each repair a critical intervention, and every successful delivery a quiet victory that fueled the larger momentum of the war, reinforcing the idea that logistics, courage, and endurance could be as decisive as tanks and artillery in shaping the outcome of battle, and that the Red Bull Express, though unsung, was an essential artery pumping life into Patton's unstoppable advance across France. By the third day, the Red Ball Express had become a machine of near-mythic endurance, a living network of men and trucks bound together by purpose, exhaustion, and the unforgiving demands of war. As the drivers faced long stretches of shell-pocked roads under blazing sun or pouring rain, their hands blistered from gripping steering wheels for hours on end, feet cramped and swollen, bodies aching from constant vibration. Yet the convoy pressed on, knowing that the front lines depended entirely on their ability to keep moving. Each driver internalizing a responsibility that went beyond orders or rank, a personal commitment to the men who fought ahead, to the wounded who waited for medical supplies, and to the tanks and artillery that could not advance without fuel. With every mile covered a silent declaration of determination. The roads themselves became an adversary, twisting through bombed-out towns, over makeshift bridges patched together with the ingenuity of soldiers and local labor, through mud churned by rain and war alike. While the convoy wove past destroyed vehicles, abandoned equipment, and the remnants of battles still echoing in the charred earth, each turn an obstacle, a test of skill and nerve, requiring constant vigilance, quick thinking, and sometimes sheer luck to avoid disaster, as a single stalled truck could trigger a chain reaction that blocked the route and delayed the flow of life-saving supplies. Alongside the physical challenges, the drivers endured the psychological strain of knowing that German forces lurked nearby, capable of ambushes, sniper fire, or artillery strikes, forcing constant alertness, the ability to react instantly, and the mental fortitude to continue under threat. While communications were sparse and often unreliable, leaving much to instinct, experience, and the unspoken coordination developed over days of shared hardship. Despite these hardships, camaraderie flourished in fleeting moments, shared cigarettes, brief exchanges of humor, whispered encouragement, or a nod of solidarity as trucks passed each other in long columns, the men forming a brotherhood forged in adversity, driven by a combination of pride, necessity, and the raw will to succeed, with each successful delivery reinforcing morale and strengthening the invisible chain that held the entire operation together. Meanwhile, officers and sergeants monitored the flow, coordinating reroutes, repairs, and relief shifts, improvising solutions when vehicles broke down or roads became impassable, ensuring that the convoy maintained momentum even as exhaustion gnawed at every participant. And as the third day wore on, the Red Ball Express had transformed from a hurried experiment into a symbol of logistical genius and human perseverance, demonstrating that in modern warfare, the ability to move supplies efficiently could be just as decisive as the fiercest assault, and that the courage, endurance, and ingenuity of these drivers were silently shaping the pace of Patton's unstoppable advance across France. Their unsung heroism, a critical artery sustaining the lifeblood of an army racing toward victory. As the Red Ball Express pushed deeper into occupied France, the relentless pace showed no mercy, and the drivers, many barely out of their teens, found themselves caught in a rhythm that blurred days and nights into a continuous chain of motion. The roar of engines, the jolt of rough terrain, and the constant vigilance against hidden threats becoming their only companions. With little time for rest or reflection, their lives measured in miles traveled and cargo delivered. Yet even in the midst of exhaustion, the spirit of determination burned fiercely. For every crate of ammunition, gallon of fuel, or sack of rations represented not just material support, but hope and survival for the soldiers fighting at the front. A tangible lifeline that could tip the balance of a battle. The terrain itself seemed to conspire against them, with roads reduced to mud-choked tracks, rivers swollen from rain, and bombed-out towns that required careful navigation. Each obstacle a potential disaster if a truck got stuck or overturned, and yet the drivers learned to adapt with ingenuity, often forming ad hoc teams to push vehicles free, jury-rig bridges to span broken crossings, and signal each other through improvised methods when radio communications failed, creating a network of cooperation and improvisation that was as vital as the vehicles themselves. With every successful maneuver reinforcing trust and coordination among the men, German forces remained an ever-present threat, their positions unpredictable, forcing the convoy to move with a mixture of speed and caution, balancing the need for haste with the necessity of survival, knowing that ambushes, mines, or artillery fire could strike at any moment. And yet the drivers pressed on, their nerves steeled by training, experience, and the understanding that delay could mean disaster for the units depending on their deliveries. A burden that weighed heavily on young shoulders, but was met with remarkable resilience. In the rare moments of rest, soldiers shared fleeting camaraderie, trading stories, meals, and humor, small islands of normalcy that offered temporary relief from the intensity of the mission, while officers constantly juggled logistics, repairs, and rerouting, improvising when trucks failed, supplies ran low, or routes were blocked. A constant dance of adaptation and decision-making that required foresight, flexibility, and unwavering commitment, reinforcing the vital lesson that war was won not only on the battlefield but in the mastery of movement and supply, and that the uncelebrated heroes of the Red Ball Express, through sweat, skill, and sacrifice, were shaping the course of history, ensuring that Patton's tanks could advance, soldiers could fight, and victory remained within reach. Their story a testament to endurance, ingenuity, and the relentless drive of men who understood that in the machinery of war, every mile mattered, every delivery counted, and the courage to keep moving was as decisive as courage on the battlefield itself. As the convoy pressed on, the Red Ball Express became more than just a supply line. It transformed into a living organism, each truck, driver, and mechanic a vital part of its pulse, moving relentlessly through the shattered landscapes of France, where the echoes of artillery and the distant rumble of tanks reminded them constantly of the stakes, and every mile covered was a victory against not only the enemy but exhaustion, mud, and mechanical failure, the drivers developing an almost instinctive understanding of their vehicles, the sounds of engines and the vibrations of tires on uneven roads serving as a language of survival, guiding them through bombed-out bridges, shell-pocked highways, and makeshift detours that tested their ingenuity and nerve, while the constant threat of German patrols or hidden mines required vigilance, split-second decision-making, and a steady hand on the wheel, for hesitation could mean destruction. And yet despite the danger, a spirit of camaraderie flourished among the men. Shared meals at roadside stops, exchanged jokes, and stories of home becoming a thread of humanity in the chaos. Their shared purpose forging bonds that transcended the normal hierarchy of the army. And even in moments of near catastrophe, a truck teetering on the edge of a riverbank, a fuel-laden vehicle skidding in mud, the collective effort of the convoy ensured survival. The men pushing, towing, and guiding each other through challenges that would have overwhelmed a single driver. learning that cooperation, courage, and endurance were the true currency of success. Officers and sergeants worked tirelessly to maintain the flow of supplies, constantly assessing the condition of vehicles, redistributing cargo when trucks broke down, and coordinating routes to bypass destroyed infrastructure or enemy positions. Their planning and quick thinking a backbone to the ceaseless physical effort of the drivers, while the drivers themselves developed an almost personal relationship with the terrain, memorizing landmarks, anticipating pitfalls, and learning to exploit every advantage the landscape offered, their intuition honed by repetition and necessity. And the trucks, battered and patched from endless wear and tear, became extensions of their operators, responding to subtle inputs and commands, each delivery a testament to skill, determination, and a refusal to yield to the chaos surrounding them, with every successful run building confidence and reinforcing the importance of their mission. And as the days and nights blurred into a continuum of movement, danger, and fleeting rest, the Red Ball Express proved that logistics, courage, and human endurance could operate at a level as decisive as any battlefield engagement. For without these tireless men keeping the arteries of Patton's army open, the spearheads at the front would have faltered, highlighting the extraordinary role of the unheralded soldiers who, through sweat, resolve, and unbreakable spirit, ensured that the momentum of victory continued to surge forward, mile by hard-won mile, in the face of every conceivable obstacle. By the time the Red Ball drivers reached the outskirts of the forward positions, fatigue had settled into their bones like a second skin. Yet the urgency of the mission left no room for rest. The sounds of war, ahead distant artillery, the rattle of tanks, and the intermittent gunfire serving both as a warning and a motivator, compelling every man to focus, to drive, to deliver. And every turn of the wheel carried with it the weight of lives depending on the supplies they bore. And in those long hours, the drivers developed a rhythm, a synchronized dance with their trucks and the road, each shift change, each refueling, each repair carried out with mechanical precision and unspoken understanding, while the terrain itself challenged their resolve. Bombed-out roads, rubble-strewn villages, and swollen rivers demanding ingenuity, courage, and occasionally brute strength. A fallen tree could mean an hour of clearing, a damaged bridge required careful navigation, and mud could swallow a truck hole if the driver misjudged its depth. Yet no obstacle was insurmountable when met with teamwork, determination, and the ingenuity that grew out of necessity. And as the convoy moved, small victories, successfully bypassing a German patrol, making it through a flooded ford, delivering fuel to a stranded tank unit became monumental, each one reinforcing the belief that they were indispensable, that the pulse of Patton's Third Army flowed through their hands, through the clutch, the brake, the throttle, and the worn tires that gripped the scarred French countryside. And the men carried more than gasoline and ammunition. They carried hope, the knowledge that their relentless effort allowed forward units to fight, to push, to break through enemy lines, and in moments of quiet between deliveries, they reflected on the absurdity and the terror of their role. Young men thrust into a war that demanded both recklessness and precision. Yet within that duality, they discovered pride, a sense of identity tied to the mastery of a machine and the unyielding commitment to a mission, while the officers coordinating the convoy had to constantly balance risk and necessity, deciding which routes could be taken, which trucks should lead, and which drivers were best suited for the most dangerous passages. Their judgment critical, their decisions immediate, and with every mile successfully traversed. The convoy demonstrated the indispensable nature of logistics in modern warfare, a lesson as brutal as any firefight, and when night fell, the headlights cutting through fog and smoke, the Red Bull Express did not rest, for the war did not pause, and the drivers, despite blistered hands, aching backs, and sleep-deprived eyes, continued to move forward, knowing that each delivery meant another day survived for the men at the front, that their relentless, grueling, and dangerous work was the lifeblood of Patton's push into Germany, a testament to endurance, courage, and the extraordinary resilience of ordinary soldiers in extraordinary circumstances. Their story, a vivid chronicle of sacrifice, skill, an unwavering determination that kept the army moving when everything else threatened to halt. As dawn broke over the shattered villages and shell-pocked roads of France, the Red Bull Express resumed its relentless march, a ribbon of trucks stretching as far as the eye could see, engines rumbling in near-perfect unison, drivers straining against exhaustion yet driven by an understanding deeper than orders. For they knew that every gallon of fuel, every crate of ammunition, every morsel of food they delivered could mean the difference between survival and annihilation for the men locked in combat at the front. And the challenges they faced were constant and unforgiving. From sudden ambushes by retreating German units to treacherous terrain that shifted from mud-choked fields to bombed-out streets, lined with the remnants of homes and churches, each mile a test of skill, endurance, and nerves, while mechanical failures were an ever-present threat, trucks overheating, brakes failing, engines stalling, and tires bursting under the strain of overloading. Yet the camaraderie among the drivers and support crews turned these obstacles into manageable problems, each man knowing that his neighbor's success was intertwined with his own. And as convoys met at checkpoints, trucks were rerouted, repaired, and reloaded with astonishing efficiency, officers and sergeants coordinating movements with maps, radios, and sometimes little more than instinct, always aware that a single misstep could cost precious hours. Yet even in this chaos, humor, stories, and moments of levity found their place among the Red Bull men, a shared resilience that transformed exhaustion into determination. And as they pressed forward, the terrain became a narrative of the war itself. Towns on fire, bridges reduced to rubble, and fields scarred by shell craters marking the relentless advance of armies, while the drivers became silent witnesses to the cost of conflict, seeing civilians displaced, witnessing the toll on local populations, and yet pushing onward, their focus never wavering, for the mission demanded it. And there were days when visibility was reduced to mere feet, fog mingling with smoke from distant shelling, the headlights of trucks cutting through the gloom as men relied on memory, instinct, and guidance shouted from running boards to navigate the labyrinth of destruction. Every stop for fuel or repair a gamble against the clock and the enemy. And in these moments, leadership mattered most. Officers balancing the need for speed with the safety of men and materiel, making decisions that could not be delayed, and through it all, the Red Bull Express earned its legendary reputation, a logistical lifeline that enabled Patton's Third Army to maintain momentum, to exploit breakthroughs, and to keep pressure on a retreating enemy, proving that in modern warfare, supply and movement were as critical as firepower. That courage came not only on the battlefield, but on roads filled with danger and uncertainty, and that ordinary soldiers, armed with determination and trucks, could perform extraordinary feats, their story a testament to endurance, ingenuity, and the relentless pursuit of mission success that kept an army moving when the fate of the campaign hung in the balance. By mid-morning, the relentless convoy of the Red Ball Express had become a living artery of war, trucks crawling over shattered roads, dust and smoke mingling in the air as engines strained and men pushed themselves beyond the limits of human endurance. Yet the rhythm of loading, unloading, repairing, and moving forward continued with a precision born of necessity. Each driver acutely aware that a delay, a mechanical failure, or a wrong turn could spell disaster not only for himself, but for the units waiting desperately at the front. And as they navigated craters and debris, crossed half-destroyed bridges, and skirted the edges of enemy artillery fire, the men developed an almost preternatural sense of the terrain, reading the subtle cues of the road. The way mud clung differently after rain, the sound of a failing engine, or the telltale shimmer of heat from a distant burning building, while at the same time, supply officers coordinated with field commanders to ensure that every truck carried exactly what was needed, from fuel to munitions to medical supplies, a delicate balancing act in which the smallest error could cascade into catastrophe. Yet, despite the chaos, the convoy maintained a semblance of order, a testament to the discipline and ingenuity of its personnel. And even as trucks rolled through towns reduced to rubble, men caught glimpses of the war's human cost, civilians huddled in basements, children watching with wide eyes as soldiers passed by. Yet there was no time for pity, for the mission demanded continuous forward motion, the lifeblood of Patton's advance flowing along these tenuous lines of communication, and every stop to repair, refuel, or reorganize was an opportunity for soldiers to catch a fleeting breath, share a laugh, or offer a word of encouragement, knowing that morale was as crucial as mechanical reliability. And as the sun climbed higher, convoys converged at key junctions, forming temporary logistical hubs where trucks were rerouted, repaired, and refueled under the watchful eyes of sergeants and lieutenants who had learned to make decisions in seconds, prioritizing what could be moved immediately versus what could wait. And as the miles accumulated, exhaustion gnawed at every man. Yet the esprit de corps of the Red Ball Express carried them forward, a shared understanding that their efforts enabled the frontline units to continue fighting, to exploit openings, and to sustain momentum against a retreating but still dangerous enemy. And though the danger was constant from mines, ambushes, artillery, and the ever-present threat of mechanical failure, the men adapted, developed tactics, and relied on one another, forming bonds forged in the crucible of continuous, high-stakes movement. And by late afternoon, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, trucks continued to pour supplies along scarred roads, the headlights cutting through smoke and dust, and the Red Ball Express, battered, tired, but unbroken, exemplified the vital truth of modern warfare. Victory depended not only on courage in battle, but on the relentless, often invisible efforts of those who kept the army supplied, moving, and capable of striking. A living testament to the courage, endurance, and ingenuity of the ordinary men who became extraordinary through duty and necessity. Nightfall brought no respite to the drivers of the Red Ball Express. The convoy's headlights, cutting narrow paths through darkness thick with smoke, dust, and the shadows of ruined villages. Every mile a challenge as the roads turned, treacherous under the twin pressures of fatigue and the ever-present threat of enemy action. Men's hands cramped from hours of steering, bodies aching from long hours hunched over, yet the rhythm of movement never ceased. trucks weaving between craters and rubble-strewn streets, tires skidding in mud, engines roaring as they strained to carry loads of fuel, ammunition, and vital supplies toward the front lines. And in this darkness, the courage of the drivers became almost instinctual, a combination of skill, intuition, and sheer willpower, while the commanders coordinated through radio static, ensuring the convoys moved efficiently despite the obstacles, plotting the safest routes, timing convoys to avoid bottlenecks, and maintaining communication with the front to prioritize deliveries, and every stop to refuel, repair, or regroup was fleeting, a matter of minutes, as the urgency of Patton's advance demanded continuous motion. The men sharing brief exchanges of encouragement, stories, and laughter when possible. A fragile human connection against the backdrop of war. Yet always the fear lingered, of mines hidden beneath mud, of artillery fire from the flanks, of mechanical failures that could strand a truck in no man's land. And still the convoy pressed on. The Red Ball expressed a living artery pumping the supplies that kept the fighting men moving. Every truck carrying not just materiel, but the hope of continued momentum. And as the night deepened, the drivers developed an almost supernatural awareness of the road, reading its subtle shifts, listening to the engines for signs of failure, and adjusting speed and technique instinctively to avoid disaster, all while the war raged around them. Towns burning in the distance, flares lighting the sky. The sound of distant gunfire, a constant reminder of the stakes. And despite exhaustion, the camaraderie of the convoy persisted. Men helping each other with repairs, sharing food and water when possible, offering words of support. Each understanding that their survival and the success of the mission depended on unity, skill, and endurance. And as the hours stretched on into the early morning, the Red Ball Express became more than a logistical operation. It became a symbol of persistence, resilience, and ingenuity, a moving testament to the men who accepted the unseen, unglorified work of sustaining a massive army, whose courage was measured not by engagement in combat, but by the relentless drive to keep supplies flowing, knowing that without their efforts, Patton's Third Army would stall, and every mile completed, every obstacle overcome, every load delivered was a victory in itself, a quiet triumph of human determination and the critical, often invisible, machinery of war. Dawn brought no relief to the Red Ball Express as the first light revealed the devastation along the roads. Towns reduced to rubble, fields scarred by artillery, and the ever-present threat of German patrols lurking along the flanks. Yet the drivers pushed on, their trucks laden with fuel, ammunition, and rations, engines groaning under the weight, tires cutting deep ruts into mud, churned by weeks of constant traffic. Every mile a test of endurance and skill, men swapping places to keep fresh hands at the wheel when possible, sharing brief nods of encouragement, a word of advice, a half smile to remind each other they were not alone in this relentless journey. And the rhythm of the convoy became almost meditative, a steady pulse of motion against the chaos of war, while radio operators crackled with updates from forward units, commanders adjusting routes, rerouting convoys around bombed bridges or blocked roads, calculating distances and fuel, knowing that a delay could mean the difference between survival and annihilation for the troops waiting at the front. And the dangers were constant, mines buried beneath the surface waiting to claim an unwary tire, snipers hidden among ruins taking potshots, artillery shells bursting in the distance, smoke and dust reducing visibility to mere feet. Yet the drivers adapted, scanning the terrain, listening for the slightest change in engine tone, reading the road ahead with a practiced eye, every turn an incline a challenge, every stop a potential disaster. Yet still they moved, driven by discipline, duty, and the unspoken knowledge that their work kept Patton's forces moving, the lifeblood of the Third Army flowing along narrow ribbons of asphalt and dirt. And when a truck broke down, comrades jumped in to help. Mechanics working under the open sky, grease-stained hands moving swiftly to repair engines, patch tires, and get the convoy back on schedule, while food and water were shared in brief pauses. Small comforts against the relentless demands of the journey, and as the sun climbed higher, fatigue set in deeper, eyes stinging from dust, backs aching from hours hunched over the wheel. Yet the spirit of the Red Bull drivers remained, their pride in their mission tempered by exhaustion but unbroken, knowing that with each mile they conquered, each obstacle overcome. They were delivering not just supplies, but hope, sustaining the army that pressed forward against the enemy, and every successful delivery reinforced their determination. A quiet, steady heroism that went largely unrecognized, yet was essential to the advance, a testament to the resilience, ingenuity, an unwavering dedication of men who drove not for glory, but for the survival and success of their comrades on the front lines. And as the day wore on, the Red Bull Express continued its relentless course, a living, moving symbol of the vital, unglorified work that kept the Third Army's momentum alive, the heartbeat of Pattons push through Europe, every mile a story of endurance, courage, and the unbreakable human spirit under fire. Night fell over the battered roads of France, but the Red Bull Express showed no sign of slowing. Headlights cutting through the darkness like twin beacons guiding the way. Men gripping steering wheels white-knuckled, muscles screaming from hours of constant vigilance. Yet their focus never wavered, every convoy a lifeline, every delivery a small miracle, and as the trucks rumbled forward, the landscape unfolded in ghostly shapes, trees twisted by shellfire, abandoned vehicles smoldering in ditches, the remnants of villages eerily silent except for the occasional moan of a stray animal or the distant echo of artillery. Yet through it all, the drivers maintained a rhythm, a silent camaraderie built on shared hardship, the radio crackling with terse messages, some urgent, some mundane, commanders issuing orders to reroute around bombed-out bridges or clogged roads, improvising solutions under pressure, men passing instructions from cab to cab with efficiency born of necessity. And fatigue was a constant companion, eyes burning from dust and smoke, hands blistered from long hours on the wheel, yet the Red Bull drivers adapted, taking turns at the wheel, sharing scant food and water, telling jokes in hushed tones to keep spirits up, a brief laugh cutting through the tension like sunlight. And when a truck faltered, comrades leaped into action, mechanics rolling under chassis, grease-stained hands working with precision born of desperation, engines coaxed back to life, tires patched, every second precious. For the soldiers at the front waited with bated breath, every convoy a gamble with fate, the thought of delay or loss ever present, yet the drivers pressed on, knowing the lives of men and the success of Patton's advance depended on them, and through villages that had been shelled into rubble, over bridges that groaned under weight, down roads churned to mud by endless traffic, the convoy moved, a testament to human endurance and ingenuity. The trucks carrying not just fuel and ammunition, but hope, sustenance, and the promise of survival, and in the rare moments of stillness, drivers would glance at the horizon, seeing the fires of distant towns, the flares of artillery, the smoke rising in plumes. Reminders that the war was alive all around them, yet they remained steady, focused on the next mile, the next delivery, the next life they could help preserve. And as the night wore on, the rhythm of engines, the hum of tires on dirt, the quiet murmur of radio chatter, became a kind of music, a lullaby of determination, a celebration of resilience, the Red Ball Express moving inexorably forward, carrying the Third Army and the hopes of countless soldiers along narrow roads carved through destruction, a living proof of the unheralded heroism of men, whose courage was measured not in medals or accolades, but in the miles they conquered, the obstacles they overcame, and the lives they enabled to continue the fight against an unforgiving enemy. Dawn crept over the horizon, painting the scarred French countryside in muted shades of grey and gold, and the Red Ball Express rolled on. Trucks loaded with precious cargo rumbling over pitted roads, men weary but determined, muscles stiff from long hours and sleep almost non-existent, yet their eyes sharp, scanning for danger. Every curve and pothole a potential threat, every shadow a possible ambush, and the convoy moved like a single organism. Drivers communicating with hand signals, radios, and shouted commands. The rhythm of the convoy a mix of discipline and improvisation. Mechanics riding along or jumping from truck to keep engines alive. Fuel flowing, wheels turning, while commanders coordinated routes and supply priorities, rerouting trucks around blown bridges, shell-cratered roads, and areas of heavy German resistance. Each mile a challenge, each stop a chance for delay or disaster. And yet the men pressed on, sharing stories in brief lulls, passing water and food, offering encouragement, jokes cutting through the tension, fleeting moments of humanity in a landscape of war. And as the trucks threaded through ruined villages and smoke-filled fields, they carried not just gasoline, ammunition, and rations, but hope and survival for the soldiers ahead. The men in the tanks and infantry depending on every gallon delivered, every round of ammo in its right place. The difference between holding a position or being overrun and through the chaos. Fatigue, mud, and rain, the drivers adapted, using every ounce of skill and ingenuity, making repairs on the fly, rerouting, taking risks to keep the supplies moving, knowing that any pause could cost lives, that the enemy was ever present, shells and snipers a constant threat. Yet the Red Bull drivers had learned to move as if guided by instinct, a mixture of courage, recklessness, and necessity. The hum of engines and the scent of diesel a constant reminder of their mission, and when trucks stalled or went off-road, comrades leaped into action, pushing, towing, repairing, refusing to leave anyone behind, and the landscape itself became a test of endurance. Roads slick with mud, rivers swollen from rain, debris littering every path, yet the drivers found a way, improvising makeshift bridges, adjusting tire chains, navigating by memory and instinct, all while keeping the convoy moving. A lifeline for Pattons' spearheading forces, whose success depended entirely on this relentless supply chain. And as the sun rose higher, casting long shadows over broken towns and shattered forests, the Red Ball Express continued its ceaseless push, a testament to human perseverance, teamwork, and courage under fire. Each mile conquered a victory in itself, each delivery a small triumph over the chaos of war, proving that even in the darkest, most dangerous hours, ordinary men could achieve extraordinary feats, carrying the lifeblood of an army through a land scarred by conflict, moving steadily forward, mile after mile, hour after hour. Against every obstacle, ever determined, the unsung heroes of a war fought on the roads as much as on the front lines. Night fell over the battered countryside, but the Red Ball Express pressed on, headlights cutting through the darkness, illuminating twisted metal, bomb craters, and the remnants of villages that had once been home to civilians, now caught in the crossfire. Drivers straining against exhaustion, their hands blistered, their eyes gritty from dust and smoke. Yet they refused to slow, knowing that each hour lost could mean tanks immobilized, troops pinned down, and lives wasted. And the convoy moved like a living entity, trucks spaced precisely, mechanics hopping from one vehicle to the next to keep engines running. The rhythmic roar of diesel engines, a constant heartbeat, while commanders coordinated with radio operators, adjusting routes to avoid destroyed bridges or newly discovered minefields, every decision a matter of life and death. And despite the fatigue, camaraderie persisted. Brief moments of laughter or shared cigarettes breaking through the tension. Letters read aloud from home, offering fleeting comfort. Jokes about the absurdity of their situation cutting through the fear. And when a truck stalled or skidded into a ditch, men leaped into action without hesitation, lifting, pushing, towing, repairing under the faint glow of lanterns or the harsh glare of headlights, mud sucking at tires, rain pelting down, creating rivers along the rutted roads. Yet the drivers pressed forward, improvising solutions, chaining tires, fashioning makeshift bridges, and navigating by memory, instinct, and crude maps. Every mile a negotiation with the terrain and the threat of enemy attack, snipers and artillery, yet the Red Ball Express moved with relentless determination, delivering gasoline, ammunition, and rations to the spearhead units of Patton's Third Army, without which the advance would stall and soldiers would be trapped in deadly positions. And the drivers carried not just supplies, but the lifeblood of the army, their work unseen, unsung, yet vital. As tanks moved into position, troops advanced, and the tide of battle pressed forward. The men of the Red Ball Express, often overlooked by historians, but acutely aware of their importance. And as dawn approached, weary but unbroken, they continued through ruined towns and shattered landscapes, every mile a testament to endurance, courage, and the necessity of teamwork. The relentless push of trucks over mud-slicked roads, across broken bridges and past the scars of war, proving that victory depended not just on frontline soldiers, but on the men who kept the army supplied, moving and alive, each delivery a small miracle, each completed route a triumph over chaos and danger. And through it all, they maintained the rhythm of the convoy, a mechanical pulse of determination and grit, driving forward through darkness and uncertainty, embodying the spirit of persistence, courage, and sacrifice that made the Red Ball Express a lifeline, a force multiplier, and a symbol of the vital, unheralded work that keeps armies fighting and nations moving, mile after mile, hour after hour, through every hazard, ever vigilant, and never yielding by mid. The Red Ball Express had stretched across miles of scarred countryside, a continuous ribbon of trucks, each laden with fuel, ammunition, and supplies. The drivers' faces smeared with dirt and sweat, hands raw from clutching steering wheels and shifting gears, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights and the ceaseless glare of headlights cutting through dust and fog. Yet there was no slowing, no hesitation, each man knowing that somewhere ahead, Patton's tanks were stalled, men pinned down, lives hanging in the balance, and so the convoy pressed forward. Engines growling, gears grinding, mud splattering. Soldiers atop trucks waving directions, signaling hazards, guiding drivers through treacherous ruts, shell holes, and bombed-out bridges. Mechanics leaping from vehicle to vehicle, tightening bolts, repairing punctured tires, patching fuel lines, improvising with whatever materials were at hand, all while the threat of enemy fire, snipers, and artillery never disappeared, and yet there were moments of levity, brief pauses where men exchanged a cigarette, a joke, or a letter from home. Small comforts that reminded them they were human, not just cogs in a vast war machine. And as the convoy navigated narrow lanes through shattered towns, flattened villages, and forests stripped bare by battle, the drivers developed an almost instinctive understanding of the terrain, anticipating where the mud would trap a tire, where a hidden crater could send a truck sliding into a ditch, where the enemy might strike. And through it all, orders crackled over radios, commanding changes of route, adjustments to speed, coordination with tank units and infantry moving ahead. Each decision critical, each delay potentially deadly. And despite the constant danger and exhaustion, the Red Ball Express moved like clockwork, a lifeline threading its way through chaos, delivering gasoline to tanks teetering on the edge of encirclement, ammunition to troops in desperate fight, rations to soldiers who had gone days without proper food. Every delivery a tangible act of heroism, though largely unrecognized. The men of the convoy enduring mud, rain, mechanical failures, and the constant specter of death with unflinching determination. Their efforts enabling Patton's Third Army to maintain momentum, to push forward against a determined enemy. And as the sun climbed, casting long shadows over the devastated landscape, the drivers kept moving, ever vigilant. The rumble of engines, a testament to human endurance and sacrifice. Each mile marking a struggle against nature, enemy forces, and the limits of their own bodies. Yet they never stopped, never faltered, knowing that behind every mile traveled, lives were saved, battles sustained, and victory edged closer. The Red Ball Express, not merely a convoy, but a symbol of relentless perseverance, a mechanical artery pumping life into the heart of a fighting army. And as trucks rolled on, mud-choked, battered, and weary, the spirit of the men driving them burned undiminished. Their courage and commitment, the unseen force that made triumph possible in a war defined by destruction, chaos, and the unyielding demand of survival. Night fell over the shattered roads of France. The Red Ball Express still stretched across the countryside like a living, grinding organism, headlights slicing through darkness, casting eerie shadows on ruined buildings and skeletal trees, engines churning, mud, water, and oil as drivers strained against the weight of their loads. Every mile a test of skill, endurance, and nerve. The men atop trucks shouting warnings of craters, fallen telegraph poles, or shell holes, mechanics moving like ghosts along the convoy, hands greasy, faces streaked with grime, patching fuel lines, tightening wheel nuts, repairing broken steering arms, all under the constant threat of German patrols. Mines and sniper fire, each delivery a gamble with death. Yet the trucks never slowed, never stopped, carrying the lifeblood of Pattons spearhead forward, gasoline to tanks, ammunition to infantry, food to men who had gone days without proper sustenance. The convoy itself becoming a war machine, synchronized and relentless. Men learning each other's rhythms, anticipating movements, communicating with hand signals and short shouts. Sometimes laughter breaking through the tension for a fleeting moment before the next obstacle demanded full attention. And the terrain showed no mercy, mud sucking at tires, rain turning roads into rivers of muck. Bridges partially collapsed or swept away, yet the convoy surged on. Each truck a small miracle of endurance and improvisation. Makeshift repairs keeping engines running. Drivers swerving to avoid hidden craters or abandoned wreckage. Soldiers atop trucks keeping watch, scanning the darkness for enemy movement. While radios crackled with updates, reroutes, and urgent instructions, all coordinated to maintain the flow of supplies critical to the advance, and as hours passed, exhaustion mounted. Hands blistered, eyes bloodshot, bodies cramped and aching. Yet the Red Ball Express refused to yield. The men drawing on reserves of determination they did not know they possessed. For behind every mile was the knowledge that without their labor, the tanks at the front would stall. Men would be stranded, the offensive halted, and every truck that reached its destination was a victory in itself. A small but vital step toward victory in a vast and brutal war. And though the work was unglamorous, dangerous, and exhausting, there was a fierce pride in knowing that they were the unseen force sustaining the army, that each delivery kept the offensive alive, that in the mud, rain, and darkness, their courage and resolve mattered, that the Red Ball Express was more than trucks, and fuel it was hope on wheels. The pulse of an army, a testament to human endurance and sacrifice, moving relentlessly through a war-torn landscape where every mile gained was a triumph, every delivery a lifeline, and every man a hero in a struggle that demanded everything they had. And yet they gave it all, never slowing, never faltering. The Red Ball Express, alive and unstoppable, driving forward into the night, toward victory, toward history. Dawn broke over the battered French countryside, revealing the full scope of destruction left in the wake of retreating German forces and relentless Allied bombardment. Yet the Red Ball Express pressed on, a serpentine line of trucks and jeeps snaking through mud-choked roads. Headlights fading in the growing light, drivers alert, eyes scanning for signs of ambush or hidden obstacles, each man knowing the stakes. Each delivery a matter of life or death for those at the front. Mechanics moving from truck to truck with wrenches, grease-streaked faces, and grim determination. Patching radiators, replacing tires, refueling engines. The clatter of tools and roar of engines forming a constant, grating symphony, the men talking little, conserving energy, saving strength for the next mile. The terrain relentless, fields turned to quagmires. Bridges half collapsed, towns reduced to rubble. Yet the convoy surged forward, tanks and artillery waiting anxiously for fuel, ammunition, and rations. Every truck that reached its destination extending the reach of Patton's spearhead. Commanders issuing orders over crackling radios, rerouting vehicles around washed-out sections, prioritizing loads, maintaining the fragile lifeline that kept the offensive alive. Fatigue and fear mingling with a fierce sense of purpose. Drivers alternating shifts, hands blistered from the wheel, muscles screaming with exhaustion, yet eyes wide, senses sharpened. Every mile a test of endurance, every turn a gamble. The threat of mines or ambushes ever present. Scouts riding ahead on motorcycles, relaying warnings. Men atop trucks, scanning for enemy movement. The occasional flare of gunfire or distant explosion, a reminder that the war was never far. Supplies carried in these trucks meant more than victory. They meant survival, and the Red Ball drivers understood this instinctively, moving with precision, instinct, and a courage born of necessity. The roads stretching endlessly ahead, mud, rain, and wreckage forming a gauntlet they could not pause to question. Their lives entwined with the machinery they drove. The convoy itself becoming an organism, each man, each truck, a vital organ pumping life to the fighting men at the front, and, though boredom, fear, and exhaustion gnawed at them, they pressed on, driven by duty, camaraderie, and the knowledge that failure was not an option. For the tanks, infantry, and artillery depended on them. And so the Red Ball Express thundered across the French landscape, relentless, tireless, unstoppable, a lifeline of steel, fuel, and human will, carrying the promise of hope, the pulse of an army, the determination of men who refused to let fatigue, mud, or enemy fire halt their mission. Every mile conquered a testament to perseverance. Every delivery a small victory in a war defined by destruction, chaos, and the need for courage. And as the sun rose higher, casting light on a landscape scarred by battle, the convoy continued. A symbol of human endurance and unyielding commitment, driving forward into history. Every man and every truck a story of sacrifice, bravery, and the relentless pursuit of victory. By midday, the Red Ball Express had become a moving city of trucks, jeeps, and personnel carriers, each vehicle loaded to the brim with gasoline, ammunition, rations, and medical supplies, engines humming and growling under the strain, drivers pushing their machines to the limits, sweat mixing with dirt and oil, fingers blackened from handling fuel cans and chains, eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of German interference, scouts reporting craters, blocked bridges, and ambushes, every obstacle a potential disaster, yet the convoy advanced with disciplined determination, orders shouted over engines and wind, men signaling with flags, gestures, and radios, mechanics hopping from truck to fix overheating engines, patch leaky radiators, and replace shredded tires, all while the vehicles crept through the churned mud and rubble of once quiet villages now reduced to smoking ruins. Civilians huddled behind walls or in basements, watching the endless line of Allied supply trucks as if witnessing a lifeline of salvation. Drivers taking calculated risks, squeezing past destroyed tanks, shell craters, and fallen trees, the mud sucking at wheels and boots alike. Yet they pressed forward, knowing that every gallon of fuel, every crate of ammunition, every ration delivered would extend the front's momentum, enabling Patton's armored divisions to keep advancing, the convoy itself a lifeline in a war of speed and supply, men communicating through hand signals, shouted commands, and the occasional crackle of a radio. Their exhaustion mounting, but their resolve unbroken, each mile a battle of endurance and skill, navigating hairpin turns, narrow bridges, and bombed-out villages while dodging artillery fire and stray sniper bullets. The convoy functioning as a single organism, every driver, every mechanic, every truck vital to the survival of the army ahead as the afternoon sun rose higher, heat mingling with the smell of exhaust, fuel, and sweat. The Red Ball Express continued its relentless journey, the road ahead a blur of mud, smoke, and destruction, Yet they moved forward, undeterred, carrying the lifeblood of an army, men shouting encouragement, swapping stories to keep spirits up, eyes scanning the distance for any sign of trouble, hands gripping steering wheels with white-knuckled determination, minds focused on the next mile, the next checkpoint, the next delivery, every stop a chance to refuel, repair, and resume the march. And though fatigue pressed heavily on shoulders and backs, the knowledge that the soldiers at the front depended on them fueled an unwavering determination. The Red Bull Express, a testament to human endurance, ingenuity, and courage, carving a path through devastation and chaos. Each mile conquered a tribute to the men who refused to falter. Each successful delivery a lifeline thrown to the armored divisions fighting for every inch of France. The convoy moving like a steel river, unstoppable, tireless, carrying with it the hopes, lives, and willpower of an army racing against time and war itself as night fell. The Red Bull Express did not slow, headlights cutting through the darkness like piercing eyes, the rumble of engines echoing through the scarred countryside, men straining to stay awake, muscles stiff and aching, their senses sharpened by fatigue and danger. Every shadow a potential threat, every turn in the road a test of skill. Bridges trembling under the weight of overloaded trucks, mud clinging to wheels and chassis, gears grinding, clutches slipping, the convoy moving as one. A steel serpent winding through a shattered landscape. Drivers shouting warnings over radios and horns. Mechanics crawling beneath vehicles to make emergency repairs under the dim glow of lanterns and flashlights. Fuel cans clanging, chains rattling, every sound amplified in the tense night. Scouts reporting German patrols and artillery positions. Orders relayed in rapid bursts. Men pushing trucks through deep craters and collapsed roadways. The smell of smoke and burning rubber mixing with exhaust and sweat. A harsh symphony of survival. Convoy leaders calculating distances, timing, and fuel consumption, knowing that one mistake could strand vehicles and men in the open. Vulnerable to enemy fire, soldiers in the lead trucks using spotlights to guide those behind, ensuring no one veered off the path, communications brief but precise. Every driver understanding the stakes. The Red Bull Express, more than just a supply line, it was the artery of Patton's Third Army. Every delivery critical to the momentum of the armored spearhead. Men drawing on sheer willpower to fight off drowsiness, cramps, and despair, sharing small comforts like water, cigarettes and hardtack, morale sustained by camaraderie and the knowledge that the men ahead relied on them utterly. Every mile conquered, reinforcing the fragile thread connecting supply to frontline combat. Convoys weaving around destroyed vehicles, shell craters, and abandoned tanks. Drivers making split-second decisions to avoid disaster. Mud and debris spraying across windshields. Men shouting directions and encouragement, the night air tense with anticipation, yet punctuated by fleeting moments of humor. A shared joke or shout to break the monotony. The convoy a testament to ingenuity and endurance. Engines overheating, tires shredded, yet the men continued. Mechanics performing miraculous fixes in record time. Trucks barely holding together, yet still pressing forward. The road a ribbon of destruction illuminated by headlights, flares, and the occasional distant fire. Every mile a challenge to their skill and nerve, yet every mile also a victory. The Red Bull Express pushing through the darkness with relentless determination, carrying the lifeblood of an army, men driven not just by orders, but by the knowledge that each delivery kept the advance alive, a moving testament to courage, stamina, and the unyielding will to keep Patton's tanks rolling, to keep the fight moving forward, to keep hope alive in the face of destruction and exhaustion, and through the long, grueling night. The convoy did not falter, each truck, each driver, each mechanic part of a single, unstoppable force racing against time, enemy, and the relentless weight of war itself. By the first light of dawn, the Red Ball Express was still moving, a seemingly endless line of trucks stretching over miles of devastated countryside, engines coughing and clattering, drivers weary but relentless, every man acutely aware that the success of Patton's armored thrust depended on their determination. Mud and debris coating tires and undercarriages, radios crackling with updates from the front, scouts reporting on damaged bridges and enemy positions, mechanics leaping into action to keep the convoy moving, soldiers taking turns resting just long enough to stave off collapse, the smell of gasoline and sweat mingling with the morning air, a chorus of horns, shouts, and the grinding of metal forming the soundtrack of survival. Every mile a test of endurance, skill, and nerve. Drivers negotiating hairpin turns, shelf roads, and makeshift detours. Each truck carrying vital ammunition, fuel, and rations. The cargo not just supplies, but the lifeblood of the advancing forces. Every obstacle overcome a small victory, yet the threat of German ambushes or artillery fire never far from mind. As they pressed on, the convoy became a study in coordination, leadership, and improvisation. Convoy commanders making split-second decisions to reroute trucks, prioritize repairs, and maintain the flow of critical supplies. Men working together with a shared sense of purpose, passing fuel cans, assisting with stuck vehicles, calling out hazards, a human chain of endurance and willpower. The road a gauntlet of mud, craters, and wreckage. Trucks sliding and fishtailing, wheels spinning hopelessly until a push from comrades freed them. The sun climbing higher, baking the mud, turning the roads into a sticky trap. Yet the convoy pressed on, relentless, unstoppable, a moving testament to American resolve. Drivers counting the miles, navigating by memory and instinct. Every town, every landmark a checkpoint, a reminder of progress. The convoy threading through forests, fields, and bombed-out villages, towns abandoned and scarred by conflict, the remnants of war stark against a determined advance. Occasional bursts of gunfire or distant explosions serving as grim reminders of the stakes. Yet the men of the Red Ball Express pressed on, undeterred, motivated by duty, camaraderie, and the knowledge that each delivery meant life and victory for the men at the front. Lunch cans and water bottles passed between drivers. Brief moments of levity cutting through exhaustion. Shared laughter a balm against fatigue and fear. Yet the tension never fully dissipating. Every bend in the road a potential ambush. Every smoke plume a possible threat. Yet each obstacle met with ingenuity and grit. The convoy pushing past limits, forging a path through chaos, embodying the relentless momentum of Patton's army. The Red Ball Express not merely a logistical operation, but a living, breathing testament to perseverance, courage, and the unyielding spirit of men united in purpose, driving day after day, mile after mile, through mud, fire, and destruction, knowing that the fate of hundreds of men, tanks, and the advance of the Third Army rested on their shoulders. and refusing to fail, refusing to stop, forging history on wheels, gasoline, and sheer willpower as the convoy pushed deeper into enemy territory. The sun climbed higher, baking the mud into a stiff, sticky mess that threatened to immobilize even the sturdiest trucks, yet the men pressed on, knowing that every delivery brought Pattons, armored divisions, closer to their objective. Every mile carried a weight far beyond the physical, the responsibility of sustaining a war effort resting heavily on their shoulders. Mechanics leaping from truck to truck, tools in hand, tightening bolts, patching leaks, coaxing engines back to life. Drivers shifting gears with precision, navigating shell-crated roads and overturned vehicles. Convoy commanders shouting instructions over the roar of engines, their voices barely carrying above the cacophony. Scouts running ahead to report obstacles or enemy sightings. The smell of gasoline, smoke, and exhaust mingling with the dusty air. A constant reminder of the danger and urgency. Trucks carrying fuel for tanks, ammunition for artillery, rations for soldiers, each cargo a lifeline. The Red Ball expressed the literal artery feeding the front lines, men taking shifts resting in the cabs, snatching minutes of sleep whenever possible, bodies stiff and aching, blisters and bruises accumulating, yet morale held firm, bolstered by camaraderie, shared purpose, and the knowledge that failure was not an option. Small victories celebrated, briefly a truck freed from the mud, a successful bridge crossing, a clear stretch of road before pressing on to the next challenge. German forces attempting to cut off supply lines, sporadic skirmishes erupting along the route, drivers and guards responding with caution and discipline, keeping the convoy moving despite ambushes and artillery fire. Every decision critical, whether to stop and assist a disabled truck or push forward to maintain the schedule. Tension high, nerves frayed, yet professionalism and training guiding every action. Villages burned or abandoned lining the route. The devastation of war visible in every collapsed building and charred tree. Yet through it all, the Red Ball Express moved relentlessly. A testament to endurance and ingenuity, men improvising repairs, forming human chains to pull trucks from mud, using planks and chains to bridge gaps. The convoy a symphony of motion and determination. Leadership constant and decisive, ensuring order amidst chaos. Soldiers aware that each delivery could save lives and turn the tide of battle. The pressure unrelenting but focus unwavering. Trucks stretching mile after mile, horns sounding, engines roaring. Drivers communicating with hand signals and shouted warnings. The chain of men, metal, and fuel moving forward like a living entity. Unstoppable, resilient, embodying the spirit of the Third Army. The Red Ball Express more than a supply line, a symbol of determination, courage, and the unyielding will of men to see their mission through, pushing past exhaustion, danger, and despair. Every mile a testament to human endurance. Every delivery a strike against the chaos of war. Forging history 1 mile at a time through mud, fire, and the unforgiving roads of Europe. Night fell over the war-torn landscape, but the Red Ball Express did not rest. Headlights cutting through the darkness as trucks crawled over uneven terrain. Engines straining, drivers squinting through mud-spattered windshields. Mechanics perched on running boards ready to leap into action at the first sign of trouble, the convoy stretching for miles. A serpentine line of steel and determination winding through shell-pocked villages and forested hills. Every driver acutely aware that one mistake could halt the entire supply effort. Scouts riding ahead, rifles ready, eyes scanning shadows for enemy movement. The constant threat of ambush, mines, or artillery fire keeping hearts pounding. Yet the men relied on training, teamwork, and instinct, calling out warnings, signaling hazards, and shifting loads to maintain balance on treacherous roads. The air thick with exhaust, sweat, and the occasional acrid smell of burning fuel. Soldiers snatching moments of sleep in cabs, backs hunched, limbs cramped, while the convoy rolled on, every stop a calculated risk. Every acceleration a test of nerve, bridges creaking under weight, mud swallowing wheels, yet the chain never broke. The Red Ball Express became a living organism, each truck a heartbeat, each driver a pulse driving the lifeblood of the Third Army forward. The importance of each load never lost on the men. Fuel for tanks, ammunition for guns, food for soldiers, all flowing in a steady, unbroken rhythm despite the chaos of war. Commanders issuing orders over crackling radios, coordinating movements, redirecting trucks around obstacles, patching gaps in the line, every decision a matter of survival and strategy. Yet amidst the danger and exhaustion, moments of humanity emerged, drivers sharing rations, lending a hand to free a stuck truck, offering a word of encouragement. The camaraderie as vital as the cargo, the convoy not just a supply line, but a brotherhood. Each man aware that his efforts could mean the difference between life and death for the soldiers at the front. As dawn approached, the Red Ball Express had already covered hundreds of miles. Mud-caked, weary, yet relentless, the sunrise casting long shadows over battered roads, highlighting the destruction left by retreating enemy forces, yet also illuminating the tireless work of the men who kept the Third Army moving. The trucks groaning under loads, engines rattling, tires skidding, yet continuing, each mile a triumph, each delivery a victory against the odds. The convoy a testament to ingenuity, endurance, and sheer willpower. The men driven by duty, by loyalty to their comrades, and by the knowledge that every successful run brought them closer to victory. The Red Ball Express forging a path through devastation, danger, and exhaustion, a symbol of resilience and determination, a lifeline in the midst of chaos, proving that even in the darkest hours, organization, courage, and human spirit could carry the day, pushing past every obstacle, mud, fire, and enemy attack, the relentless advance continuing, every truck, every driver, every mechanic a vital thread in the tapestry of war, weaving history mile by mile, moment by moment, until the supplies reach those who needed them most, sustaining the fight, feeding the army, and fueling the eventual triumph of Patton's forces. By mid-morning, the Red Ball Express had established a rhythm that was almost mechanical. Drivers and loaders moving in synchronized patterns, each knowing his role, the clatter of steel on steel, the roar of engines, the hiss of brakes, and the murmur of radios forming a constant soundtrack of movement and urgency. Yet the danger never abated, shells occasionally whistling overhead, mines hidden beneath mud threatening to tear apart tires and suspensions, German patrols probing for weaknesses, the men alert and tense, eyes scanning every shadow, hands tight on steering wheels, while dispatchers coordinated reroutes and supply priorities. The sheer scale of the operation staggering as trucks filled with fuel, ammunition, and rations snaked along narrow roads, occasionally having to back up to avoid obstacles, maneuver around craters, or assist a stalled companion. Camaraderie and trust forming the invisible bonds that kept the convoy moving. Mechanics jumping from truck to truck, adjusting engines, patching leaks, changing tires in record time, sweat and grime coating faces. The air filled with diesel and dust, yet morale held strong because each man understood that their labor was vital, that every gallon of fuel delivered, every shell delivered. Every loaf of bread meant the difference between success and failure at the front. At every stop, Red Bull drivers shared jokes, offered encouragement, swapped stories, and sometimes comforted each other in moments of quiet reflection, realizing that their sacrifice, fatigue, and endurance were part of something much larger than themselves, a logistical feat unprecedented in military history. The relentless pace creating bonds forged in adversity. As miles passed and obstacles were overcome, news from the front occasionally filtering back, bringing urgency and purpose, the knowledge that tanks, infantry, and artillery depended entirely on the timely arrival of supplies driving them onward, even through rain-soaked roads that turned into rivers of mud, through bombed-out villages where debris threatened to block paths, over bridges creaking under the weight of fully loaded trucks. Each driver calculating speed, balance, and risk to ensure the convoy stayed intact. The Red Bull Express, not merely a line of trucks, but a lifeline of the Third Army, moving with precision, improvisation, and courage. Every day presenting new challenges, yet overcome through coordination, ingenuity, and sheer determination, the men functioning as a single organism, anticipating each other's moves, adjusting to unforeseen hazards, taking calculated risks, pushing beyond exhaustion, the unbroken chain of vehicles becoming a symbol of American resolve and resourcefulness, proving that even in the chaos and destruction of war, discipline, dedication, and teamwork could achieve the impossible. That the seemingly mundane act of transporting fuel and supplies could hold the key to victory. As the day wore on, the convoy continued its ceaseless march, overcoming fatigue, terrain, and enemy interference. Each mile covered a testament to human endurance. Each successful delivery a victory in itself. The Red Bull Express etching its name into history as the arteries of Patton's Third Army, carrying life, hope, and the machinery of war forward through a landscape scarred by conflict, yet kept alive by the courage and resilience of those who drove, repaired, and protected it. As the convoy pushed deeper into occupied territory, the intensity of the operation increased. Roads scarred by artillery fire and bomb craters demanding constant attention. Drivers having to navigate around twisted metal, broken trees, and abandoned vehicles, all while maintaining speed to meet the strict delivery schedules. The ever-present threat of German ambushes forcing each truck to travel with vigilance, eyes scanning tree lines and ruins for movement. Radios crackling with updates from the front, relaying which units were running low on fuel, which columns were stalled, which routes had become impassable, and which bridges could still bear the weight of heavily loaded trucks. Mechanics working feverishly at temporary roadside repair points, improvising solutions to keep the convoy moving, patching tires with what materials they could find, topping off engines with any usable oil, patching radiator leaks with solder and ingenuity, drivers swapping seats to rest their comrades for a few precious minutes, while continuing to inch forward through mud and debris. The weather compounding the difficulty, torrential rain turning dirt roads into quagmires, water filling shell holes, trucks bogging down, engines straining against the sludge, the cold seeping into bones. Yet despite exhaustion, the Red Ball men continued, fueled by discipline, camaraderie, and the knowledge that every delivery kept tanks rolling, ammunition supplied, and soldiers fed at the front lines. Officers walking among the trucks, issuing orders, adjusting convoy formations to avoid congestion, rerouting around newly discovered mines, encouraging drivers, checking on their condition, providing quick instructions to maintain the flow, while sergeants kept close watch on vehicle spacing, enforcing regulations about speed and distance to prevent occasional moments of humor breaking through the tension, a shared laugh at a minor mishap, a driver swapping places with another mid-route to allow rest. All small acts of humanity in the relentless machinery of war. Supply dumps receiving the convoy in a blur of activity. Teams unloading fuel and ammo as fast as trucks could arrive. Stockpiling in forward positions to sustain Patton's spearhead. And then the trucks turning around to begin another run. The cycle repeating day and night. A logistical ballet performed under constant threat. A testament to organization, courage, and endurance. Every successful delivery a triumph over adversity. Every mile gained a vital contribution to the momentum of the Third Army. As the Red Ball Express carved its path through France, unheralded yet indispensable, the men pushing themselves beyond limits. Hearts pounding, eyes fatigued, muscles aching, yet undeterred, knowing that the fate of the armored units at the front, the lives of fellow soldiers, and the progress of the campaign depended on their unwavering commitment. The rhythm of engines and wheels on rutted roads blending into the sound of determination, creating an almost hypnotic cadence that carried them forward, mile after grueling mile. The convoy not merely transporting supplies, but sustaining the lifeblood of an army. Each day adding to the legend of the Red Ball Express, whose relentless drive, ingenuity, and courage became the backbone of Patton's advance. A story of endurance, heroism, and the crucial, often overlooked, art of wartime logistics, proving that even in the chaos of combat, organization, teamwork, and grit could turn a line of trucks into an unstoppable force. By the time the convoy reached the outskirts of the next town, the sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across shattered streets and bombed-out buildings, the drivers weary but alert, engines humming in a steady cadence as they threaded through rubble-strewn avenues, the smell of smoke and fuel heavy in the air, yet no pause could be taken. Every second counted, each delivery critical. Scouts riding ahead on motorcycles reporting enemy positions. Artillery fire occasionally cracking in the distance. A reminder of the peril that surrounded them. Yet the Red Ball drivers pressed on, their eyes trained on the horizon, constantly checking gauges and tires, adjusting loads to maintain balance, passing the occasional stranded soldier or civilian, waving or signaling as they navigated around the obstacles. The trucks forming a moving chain, a lifeline to the armored units at the front, mechanics running from truck to truck, patching leaks, tightening bolts, swapping out worn parts, often working in the mud and rain, their hands blackened with grease, faces streaked with exhaustion but determined. Every repair a small victory against the relentless demands of the road. Officers shouting orders, radios buzzing, keeping the convoy coordinated, ensuring spacing to avoid bottlenecks and potential ambushes. Drivers exchanging brief words of encouragement, a shared nod or wave, small acts of camaraderie sustaining morale. Moments of tension as mines were discovered or a truck veered too close to a crater. Rapid adjustments preventing disaster, supplies being delivered with precision, ammunition, fuel, rations, medical supplies, each pallet vital to the success of Patton's advance. The rhythm of loading and unloading, driving and repairing, a relentless cycle that blurred the distinction between night and day. Sleep, stolen in stolen moments, atop a truck or under a canvas, the cold biting through clothing, rain soaking boots and gloves, yet still they moved, driven by duty and the knowledge that the men at the front depended entirely on their efforts. Occasional bursts of laughter breaking the monotony, a joke or a playful shove. The briefest human connection amidst the strain of continuous movement. The roads themselves a battlefield, mud and debris constantly threatening to stall progress. Yet ingenuity kept the convoy alive, ramps constructed, winches employed. Teams of drivers and mechanics working in concert to overcome every obstacle. The determination of the Red Ball Express becoming legendary. A story whispered among soldiers at the front, a symbol of tenacity and courage. As the convoy stretched across miles of French countryside, a vital artery pumping the lifeblood of an advancing army, proving that in war, sometimes the greatest victories were not won with guns and tanks, but with wheels, engines, and the relentless perseverance of ordinary men doing extraordinary work. Each successful mile reinforcing the indispensable nature of logistics. The quiet heroism of those who kept Patton's army supplied, moving and fighting. Their collective effort a testament to discipline, courage, and the unyielding spirit of the Red Ball Express. An achievement that would echo in military history long after the engines had cooled, and the war was won. As night fell over the shattered countryside, the Red Ball Express pressed on, headlights cutting through the darkness, illuminating craters and wreckage, drivers squinting through rain-slicked windshields, mud splattering across the grille and undercarriage, mechanics perched on running boards or balancing atop flatbeds to make last-minute adjustments, radios crackling with updates from the front. The faint rumble of artillery in the distance, a constant reminder of the dangers lurking beyond each bend. Yet the men refused to slow, knowing that every delivery of fuel, ammunition, or food could mean the difference between victory and defeat for Patton's spearheading units. Fatigue gnawed at arms and shoulders, eyes heavy but alert, bodies cramped from long hours in cramped cabs. Yet adrenaline and duty kept them moving. Small gestures of encouragement exchanged thumbs up, brief nods. A shouted joke over the roar of engine-sustaining morale and focus. Every mile a small triumph over exhaustion and the treacherous terrain. Roads reduced to rivers of mud, potholes swallowing wheels, bridges damaged or missing entirely, forcing detours that tested skill and nerve. The convoy adapting on the fly, scouts relaying intelligence on enemy positions, sniper fire occasionally spiking tension, trucks darting around debris, drivers swerving to avoid newly discovered mines, mechanics ready to leap into action if a vehicle faltered. Each obstacle surmounted, reinforcing the unity and efficiency of the Red Ball crews. The rhythmic pounding of diesel engines blending with the splatter of rain and the occasional explosion into a chaotic symphony that somehow propelled them forward. Conversations brief and functional, load secure. Tires holding, clear for 50 yards ahead. A language of necessity and survival. The monotony of continuous driving punctuated by adrenaline-fueled bursts as trucks approached crossroads or towns, where ambushes could await. Headlights scanning shadows for any sign of movement. Every decision critical, every second precious. Stops for rest fleeting, mechanics grabbing a sandwich or gulp of coffee as they adjusted brake lines or repaired blown tires. Officers coordinating movements via radios, ensuring spacing between trucks to prevent bottlenecks and accidents, yet always mindful that speed was essential to outrun potential enemy interception. Towns passed with buildings smoldering, civilians watching silently. A ghostly reminder of the war's toll, yet the drivers' focus never wavered. Their mission singular: keep the lifeline of fuel and supplies flowing, pushing further into the night, mile after mile. The darkness masking both danger and determination, each successful delivery strengthening the advance. A testament to the relentless courage, discipline, and ingenuity of men who were ordinary in appearance but extraordinary in action. The Red Ball Express moving as one, a living embodiment of perseverance. An unbroken chain of trucks threading through a war-torn land, proving that in the machinery of warfare, logistics and determination could turn the tide as effectively as any battle plan. Every exhausted yet steadfast driver a hero in his own right. Every mile a small but crucial victory, contributing to the unstoppable momentum of Patton's Third Army. As dawn broke over the horizon, the Red Ball Express finally rolled into the staging area, trucks battered, tires caked with mud, engines still rumbling, drivers slumped in their seats. Faces streaked with grime, but eyes bright with relief and accomplishment. The war-torn landscape stretching endlessly before them. The smell of diesel and wet earth hanging heavy in the air. Officers clapping shoulders and handing out brief rations. Mechanics already crawling under vehicles to check brakes and transmissions. Men exchanging weary smiles and quiet words of pride, knowing they had done something extraordinary. Not for medals or glory, but for the soldiers at the front who now had fuel, ammunition, and supplies to keep fighting. The air filled with a mix of exhaustion and triumph. A small bonfire crackling as some grabbed a hot cup of coffee, the first warmth they had felt in hours. Letters scribbled quickly in notebooks by a few determined writers hoping to capture the intensity, the fear, and the triumph of the convoy. The trucks themselves lined up like tired but steadfast soldiers, their cargo now unloaded, ready to return to the next rung, the sun climbing higher, casting light on the mud-splattered vehicles. The quiet hum of engines slowly fading as the men dismounted and stretched aching limbs. Lieutenant Partridge looking over the scene, a faint smile on his face as he watched his drivers, each one exhausted yet proud, knowing they had played a vital role in keeping Patton's army moving. The sound of laughter and the occasional shout breaking the stillness as men recounted narrow escapes, minor mishaps, and acts of courage that would never make the headlines, but were the backbone of the campaign. The Red Ball Express, more than just a convoy, had become a symbol of perseverance, ingenuity, and the vital importance of logistics in war. A reminder that victories were not just won on the battlefield, but also on the long, grueling roads behind the lines, where ordinary men, often overlooked, pushed through exhaustion, danger, and impossibility to ensure the advance continued. The convoy readying itself once more for another run, engines starting, gears shifting. The rhythm of the road calling them back into the fray. Each man aware that their work was far from over, but that today they had achieved something remarkable. Their unity, courage, and tireless effort proving that the Red Ball Express was not just a supply line, but the lifeblood of Patton's Third Army. A testament to what could be accomplished when determination met duty. and as the trucks disappeared down the muddy road, the men left behind knew that in the chaos of war, they had carved a legacy of resilience, courage, and unsung heroism that would be remembered long after the guns fell silent.